I'm Amanda Steinberg, and I did Section 1 of Chapter 5, pages 159 through 169. This chapter talks about performance processes and memory retrieval. The first topic it talks about is memory and learning. Any conditioning that is learned at one time can be accessed in the future. Robert Henderson did an experiment on this where he paired a conditional stimulus with a mild shock in rats. He tested to see if the response was remembered between a 1 and 60-day time period, and the results were that the fear response was almost perfect after 60 days. Not always will you be able to access a conditioned response, because sometimes animals forget and generalize to other stimuli. When we forget, it leads to response to untrained stimuli. Henderson and Thomas proved this because fear inhibition can be forgotten more quickly than fear excitation. This shows how fear and anxiety can emerge out of the blue after some time. Gordon, Smith, and Katz experimented on forgetting. They trained rats to run from a white compartment to a black compartment during flashing light to avoid shock. 4 days later, it took them longer than it did the first time. Some rats received reminders. The most beneficial were the rats who received a reminder 10 minutes or 24 hours before the test. But when they were reminded 72 hours before, it wasn't effective. This is called memory reactivation, which is when forgotten memories can be triggered by re-exposure to part of the original learning situation. The reminder in this experiment was being in the white compartment for 15 seconds with a flashing light. It then talks about causes of forgetting. There's 3 classical reasons for forgetting. The first is trace decay. This is the idea that memory might literally fade or decay. The second is interference, which is memory for information learned at one point in time can be hurt when conflicting information is learned at some other point in time. There's 2 types of interference. There's proactive interference, which is when interfering information is learned before the target information. And there's retroactive interference, which is when interfering information is learned after the target information. And the third reason is retrieval failure. This is when information may remain available in the memory but forgotten if you can't retrieve it. Gordon, McCracken, and Des Beach and Maurer experimented with rats, also running from white to black compartments to avoid shock with flashing light. But the training occurred in 2 different rooms this time, differing in size, light, and odor. When put in different rooms, they lost their performance because they were in a different context. Godin and Baldi also ran an experiment. They ran this experiment with scuba divers, which is when they made them memorize a list of words either on land or underwater, and the results were that they remembered it better in the same context. This chapter also talks about remembering, forgetting, and extinction. Extinction is not remembering for good because spontaneous recovery goes against what that's saying. So if you think that something is completely extinct, it's not because of spontaneous recovery. So this brings up the renewal effect. This is recovery of responding that occurs when the context is changed after extinction, especially strong when the context is changed back to the original context of conditioning. Also, the conditional stimulus is important because after extinction, it has 2 meanings. For example, if you are shocked after extinction or if you are not shocked. The current meaning depends on the current context. So during extinction, the conditional stimulus and unconditional stimulus association isn't destroyed. Instead, the conditional stimulus acquires a second inhibitory association with the unconditional stimulus, which suppresses the conditional response by inhibiting the unconditional stimulus's node. So there are 2 meanings of the conditional stimulus. 1, it excites the unconditional stimulus node, and 2, it inhibits the unconditional stimulus's node. This is also known as temporal context, which is when contextual stimuli that change with the passage of time.